Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Defense of Animals Sustainable Activism webinar. My name is Lisa Levinson, and I'm your host today, and I'm the director of the Sustainable Activism campaign, and we offer emotional and spiritual resources for animal activists. And it's a real treat for me to introduce our guest. We have Anita Kreitz with us today, and I will get into her details in just a moment. I wanted to share with you a few announcements and just let you know how grateful we are that you're joining us this evening.
So thank you so much.
This program is, yay! So our program is really based on an effort to provide support services for animal activists, just like this webinar. We'll offer tips and tools on how to be an activist that helps you to stay in this movement for the long haul so that we can all continue to help the animals and also take care of ourselves. So we do have some other services that are also available to you. I just wanted to let you know we have an animal activist helpline, and this is a service that you can call for free counseling, and the number is 1-800-705-0425, or you can email helpline@idausa.org. So that's one of the services. And we also offer an animal activist online support group where many of us gather once a month and we have an opportunity to talk amongst each other about issues that we face as activists. So I'll go ahead and put some of the links on there in the chat box. And many of you have already figured out how to use the chat box, which is great. If you're online with us, you'll see the chat box, and it's a wonderful way for us to communicate with each other during the webinar. And you can also let us know, myself and Anita, if you have any questions. That's a great place to let us know. The first part of the webinar will be a presentation by Anita, and then after that, we'll open it up for questions from everyone. And so you can either share your questions on the phone or by unmuting your mic, or in the chat box. So there's a lot of ways for us to connect with each other. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us today. It's really a treat. So I'm going to begin by introducing Anita officially. And so here. So Anita Kreitz is co-founder and co-organizer with Toronto Pig Save, and that's torontopigsave.org, and the SAVE movement, which is thesavemovement.org. She coordinates weekly vigils, does photography, and produces short videos on social media. The group has a subway ad and climate vegan campaign, which is climatevegan.org. And Anita has a PhD in political science and has taught courses in social movement strategies and tactics. She was the recipient of the 2012 Lisa Grill Compassion for Animals Award from the Toronto Vegetarian Association and Culture and Animals Foundation grants in 2012 and 2013. So it is quite an honor to have Anita here with us this evening. So I'll be here, even though I'm going to turn the presentation over to Anita in just a moment. I'll be in the background, so if you have any questions, even if you don't see my face, I'm still here with everyone. And I'm responsible for some of the tech issues that happen during the webinar. So if you can't hear or have any sorts of issues, feel free to let me know in the chat box and I'll try to attend to them. So again, this is really a delight. And I'm excited to really hear the webinar today as well. So an honor. So at this point, I'm going to pass over I'll say the mic, but perhaps it's the webcam, over to Anita. And then we'll also, when you're ready, just let me know and we can pull up your slides.
Thank you. Yes, can you pull up the slides now? And I'll begin.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Lisa, and In Defense of Animals for organizing this series. So I'm going to speak about bearing witness and love-based activism today, and begin by saying that the group started 5 years ago in the late fall of 2011 when I adopted a dog, Mr. Bean. Each morning we walked along Lakeshore in downtown Toronto, and we would witness in rush hour traffic 8 or 9 transport trucks carrying sad and terrified pigs to the nearby Quality Meat Packers slaughterhouse. The sight of this unimaginable injustice sparked the formation of Toronto Pig Save in December 2011. Half a year later, our group committed to holding 3 vigils a week, and as of July, we will have kept that promise for 5 years. As a community, we bear witness of pigs, cows, sheep, goats, and chickens in transport trucks entering Toronto and area mass industrial killing facilities. Our form of bearing witness is mainly partial, because we are not helping the animals before us the way we ought to, that is saving the animals before us who plead for their lives. This is what makes it so heartbreaking. But it is still better to look and not turn away, and to be present, to witness the animals firsthand and to share their stories. We reach out our hands and they come to us and sniff us. We communicate, they plead for help, and we say we love them and we're sorry. We take photos and videos so we can share their stories with the world. We give the pigs water in the summer's heat. Moments later, the trapped animals are rushed off to the slaughterhouse, where they will face a terrible and horrific slaughter in front of each other, with no more compassionate human eyes, but slaughterhouse workers wearing nets and hats and earplugs to blot out the sounds of screaming animals and the loud industrial saws and killing machinery. In the last year, we have bore witness more fully to a precious few individuals who we managed to rescue out of the hundreds of thousands we have bore witness to so far. A white lamb we named Meadow in April 2015, and a year later, just a couple months ago, Ubi, a 1-month-old black lamb, both from Newmarket Meatpackers Slaughterhouse. On August 28, 2015, at a 24-hour vigil, we appealed to the plant manager at Maple Leaf Poultry Chicken Slaughterhouse in Toronto to spare 1 chicken. And a minute later, a chicken named Mercy was whisked off the kill floor by the production manager, and she now resides at Cedar Row Sanctuary.
Anita, can I ask you one quick question?
Sure.
Just let us know occasionally. Are you on slide 2?
Yeah. So
okay,
yes,
perfect.
I'm good. Okay, great.
Okay.
But mostly our story is trying to help build a mass-based grassroots SAVE movement where people bear witness, partially, at least initially, by using a love-based community organizing approach. The aim is to bear witness to every animal at every slaughterhouse. Only by facing it will people no longer want to participate in the evil of animal exploitation. So as of July, Toronto Pig Save members will have attended about 800 vigils in the course of 5 years. Other SAVE groups are emerging around the world, and there are about 50 groups now in Canada, the US, Australia, and Europe. And the group's intensive on-the-ground, love-based community organizing approach is inspired by Tolstoy, Gandhi, Cesar Chavez, the United Farm Workers, Lois Gibbs of the eco-justice movement, and others. So basically our campaign strategies include bearing witness, using art, photos, and videos to help share the stories of the animals, using intensive love-based community organizing approach, and developing a worldwide movement. And these are some photos that we have taken at our weekly vigils. We bear witness because it's better to be there than not to be there. It's better to look than to turn away from egregious injustice and suffering. We see pigs that are worried. Pigs are extremely expressive. We see the cows terrified. They can smell from 5 miles away, so they know the slaughterhouse is there. They smell the blood and the guts and the skins, and we see them with terrified eyes. In the summer's heat, the pigs have no way to cool off in the transport trucks, and we give them water. I wanted to start with a quote about bearing witness. So the first part of the 2-part presentation is on bearing witness, and then the second part is on love-based activism. So beginning with bearing witness, what is it and why do we do it? I really like this quote from Tolstoy from his book, A Calendar of Wisdom. I recommend this book for everyone. He says, "Do not believe in words, yours or others, believe in deeds." And that's what bearing witness is about. And he specifically defined bearing witness as when the suffering of another creature causes you to feel pain, do not submit to the initial desire to flee from the suffering one, but on the contrary, come closer, as close as you can, to her who suffers and try to help her. And all of us are animal lovers. And what does it mean to love animals? Well, Tolstoy defines love in general as the wish to do good. Love is not merely a word, but it's an activity directed to the welfare of others. And to love someone, you not only give another your time and strength, but you wear out your body for the loved objects and give your life to it. That's what he says in his book on life. So to love animals means to bear witness at sites of injustice and suffering, even if it causes you personal pain and trauma and wears down your body, because that's what love is. So I wanted to also expand on this definition of bearing witness. Tolstoy's best friend, closest confidant, was Vladimir Chertkov, and he was also an ethical vegetarian, and he wrote this book called One Life in 1912. And he explained in greater detail what bearing witness is about. He says, we are so used to commonplace killing of the animals around us and for us that when we think about it, we do so for the most part hastily without consideration of the conditions in which the animals are having their lives taken. The suffering of animals killed for us is barely recognized and inflicts repulsion rather than compassion. Instead of protecting suffering creatures, we protect ourselves by hiding away from the wicked, bloody scene that is being performed by other people's hands. Being more concerned with ourselves than with tortured animals, which are killed for us, we deprive them of the miracle of life. And we deprive ourselves of the highest joy of compassion towards living beings. We lose a chance to save them from the futile torture and premature death. A simple reminder around the dinner table that a meal being served consists of dead animals parts tends to kill the appetite and indignities the diners. Nothing more significantly reveals the disgusting and illegal nature of this action than the need to hide its true meaning from oneself. To get a true notion of this matter, one, first of all, has to face it. And the best way to literally face it is by visiting a slaughterhouse or a kitchen yard and firsthand witnessing the killing of livestock or poultry for our table. I have no doubt that the great majority of people who would do it several times with diligence very soon would recognize the unlawfulness of what is happening before their eyes. So what I love about this quote is he says, if people in general faced it, they would not participate in it. And he says, don't only face it once, but do it more often. And that's what our group is about. It's about regularly bearing witness. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of animal activists bearing witness. And I'll start with Leo Tolstoy. So he was preparing the introduction of a book, a British book that that his publishing firm was translating. It was Howard Williams' book, The Ethics of Diet, which is a book about famous vegetarians. So it has a chapter on Pythagoras and other famous vegetarians. And so he wrote the introduction called The First Step. And I really like what he said about how he avoided going to slaughterhouses. He said, at first I felt ashamed to do so, as one is always ashamed of going to look at suffering, which one knows is about to take place, but which one cannot avert. And so I kept putting off my visit. And so what he's talking about is how painful a partial form of bearing witness is when, you're just looking, but you're not fully helping the animals. But at the end of the day, he did go to a slaughterhouse in Tula and wrote this very powerful essay called The First Step. In the 1880s, Louisa May Alcott, the very famous author, describes a pitiful scene when she stopped by a stream-fed pool near a stopped cattle train and heard the mournful sounds that came from it. She noticed two barefoot girls in old hats and shabby gowns using their aprons to collect berries and water to give to the suffering sheep and cows. Miss Alcott writes, "I wish I could have told those tender-hearted children how beautiful their compassion made that hot, noisy place, And what a sweet picture I took away with me of those two little girls of charity. So there are other examples of people bearing witness. In the 1890s, the National Food Reform Society and the Humanitarian League in the United Kingdom took readers behind the scenes at the dreadful slaughterhouses and live markets of Smithfield in London, which horrified the public, and it was alluded to as a shameful place by Charles Dickens in Great Expectations. In 1995 in England, there emerged a large protest movement against live exports of animals after the Dover port stopped exporting animals, and the animal agriculture industry sought small ports to ship or fly animals to France and the Netherlands, while there was a court case where they challenged the Dover ports. Unfortunately, the animal agriculture industry won, and the Dover port had to reopen. And against the city council's decision, they were forced to resume live exports. In February 1995, Jill Phipps was crushed to death in Baggington by a lorry transporting live calves heading for continental Europe via Coventry Airport. Her actions encouraged many to take part in the live export demos in many small towns and ports along the coastline of Britain. Other groups emerged shortly after, doing very similar work involving bearing witness of animals being sent to slaughter. Reverend Christa Blank set up Animals Angels in Germany. There's a group called Eyes on Animals in the Netherlands, which also follows trucks and does reports, and also volunteers give water to the animals. Farm has done work like this. The Farm Animal Rights Movement has done vigils at slaughterhouses. The Essex Animal Defenders have also done some. And I wanted to quote Animals Angels founder Christa Blank, who wrote a book called With the Eyes of Love. She writes, anyone who becomes involved in the fate of quote unquote, slaughter animals will inevitably witness brutality and death on an unimaginable scale. Their suffering takes place behind closed doors, away from the public gaze. Anyone who wants to know what is done to farm animals has to seek out the facts at auctions and animal markets. Anyone who wants to alleviate the misery of their last days must accompany the animals as they are transported to the slaughterhouse. Anyone who
Anita?
Yes.
Anita, can we just quickly, is this part of one of the slides?
No.
Okay, great. No problem. We're just trying to see if we're keeping up.
Okay.
Okay.
So anyone who wants to alleviate the misery of their last days must accompany the animals as they are transported to the slaughterhouse. Anyone who insists on respect and protection of the animals has to deal with veterinarians, officials, transporters, dealers, and police, and so forth. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how common bearing witness is before Toronto Pig Safe started doing it. And I ran into a volunteer who has joined our vigils. Her name is Sue Spar, and she said 10 years ago, before our group even formed, she saw a transport truck carrying cows driving on the highway. She started to cry and decided to follow the truck. The truck went to Toronto and turned into Guns Road and then Glen Scarlett Road and stopped in front of St. Helens Meatpackers, where we currently do weekly vigils. And because the unloading area was full, the truck stopped on the public road. So she went up to the truck and talked to the cows and through the portholes, and the slaughterhouse staff came out across the street, approached her, and said she must stop interfering. She said she wasn't doing anything. They said she was trespassing and must leave or they'll call the police. She said it was a public road, but I wanted to mention this because this was exactly what happened when we first started bearing witness. They claimed that the sidewalk and even the road owned to them. And I said, oh, do you own the rest of the city as well? So I wanted to give you that history. And Lisa also mentioned that she bore witness. And so it's nice to see how widespread this strategy is. So the question is, why bear witness? Before I go into love-based activism. So Ramakrishna said that I think we can look to other social movements for some ideas about the different dimensions and strategies of bearing witness. And Romain Rolland wrote a biography of Ramakrishna Vivekananda, and he quotes him saying, when he saw people dying of famine, he was with his friend who was a wealthy man, and he said that he would sit among the poor people that were dying and would share their fate. He refused to move because he asked his rich friend to help them, and he said, well, that doesn't, what does a little bit of help matter? It doesn't make a difference. Well, he said, he said, I'll just sit, as I quote here, he said, he wept, declaring that he would not move from thence, but would share their fate. So bearing witness involves that type of dramatic action, like going where the suffering people or animals, human or non-human animals are, and living in their conditions and sharing their fate as a means of protest. The Quakers and Greenpeace have also bore witness. They have protested against nuclear testing by sailing ships into ground zero. Martin Luther King also has borne witness and has said that he talked about how war. Let me just get the slide here. Pull up the slide here. He said, "Had I not committed myself to the principle that looking away from evil is in effect a condoning of it, those who lynch, pull the trigger, point the cattle prod, or open fire hoses act in the name of the silent." So he was saying how in the civil rights movement, it was wrong to condone that, cattle prods were used against children. And but then he talked about the Vietnam War, and he said, I had to therefore speak of it. I speak out if I was to erase my name from the bombs which fall over North and South Vietnam, from the canisters of napalm. The time has come, indeed, it was past due, when I had to disavow and disassociate myself from those who, in the name of peace, burn, maim, and kill. So I also want to mention that the animals themselves bear witness all their lives. So we bear witness momentarily, 2 hours at a vigil, 24 hours when we're really dedicated and do an all-day vigil, 30 hours, that's our longest vigil, when we did a 30-hour vigil at a cow safe, and we think, oh, wow, this is really dedicated. But the sad thing is that pigs, most pigs bear witness for 6 months till they're slaughtered. Parents, mother sows and dairy cows, they bear witness for a few years. And you can imagine how traumatized they are. You think we are traumatized, with PTSD, with the bearing witness. It's nothing compared to how much the animals endure, unfortunately. So I have some photos here showing how wounded they are, how scared they are. And these are pigs. Most of these pigs are just 6 months old. And there's numbers carved on their skins, tattoos. And when you bear witness firsthand, you can see the animals pleading with their eyes and pleading with their vocalizations for help. They come up to you. I watch passersby hoping you'll help. We see "help me" all the time when we look at them. And also the animals in the trucks, they have each other. So we often see them nuzzling each other, finding comfort in each other. And the question is, who comforts the pigs in the transport trucks? Is it us, who see them for a moment or a minute? I mean, we try for that, but it's really the pigs do. They comfort each other. Here's a scene where there was a pig that was lying down, and the other pig went up to him or her and sniffed and reassured the pig. Nonetheless, it is a very grueling experience, bearing witness. It's very difficult, but it's paradoxical. It's also very uplifting and powerful. And Ramakrishna says, he points to this paradox when he says, "But my heart has grown much, much larger, and I have learned to feel the suffering of others." So what happens to you as a human being when you don't turn away and you come as close as you can when someone else is suffering? Your heart becomes bigger. You become a better person, and you become more alive. And it's what we all need to do. So the second part of my presentation is about love-based activism. So what our group does is engages in community organizing. We've learned from the experiences of Saul Alinsky, who wrote Rules for Radicals and Reveille for Radicals, and Cesar Chavez, who helped form the United Farm Workers with others, and Gandhi, and also Leo Tolstoy, who wrote a book called The Kingdom of God is Within You, which is about love and truth in personal change and social change. Gandhi said social change will occur not in some dim and distant future, but within a measurable time, the measure being the measure of the effort we put forth. Can you not make them see that real success lies in the effort itself, which in our case is passive resistance? I love this quote so much because anything like a world where there is animal justice is possible. And the amount of time it will take to achieve that world depends on how much effort all of us put into it. So the more of us make animal justice a priority in life and put our time and resources into organizing, the faster we'll achieve that world. It's that simple. So I wanted to say a few things about Tolstoy's The Kingdom of God is Within You. It's a book that he wrote in the 1890s and published in 1893. And Gandhi read it when he was in South Africa in 1893, and it changed him. It was one of the most profound influences on his life, and he decided to dedicate his life to nonviolence after reading that book. And in that book, Tolstoy talks about return love for hate. And he says the best and easiest way to thwart evil in this world is to respond to it with kind words, return an evil action with good. It's about being non-judgmental, and he likes to quote a passage from the gospel saying, "I came not to judge, but to save." I find it's really good to remind oneself. I mean, that's what the SAFE movement is about. Trying to change everyone, trying to save save animals, save the planet, save ourselves. And also, Tolstoy in the book talks about pointing out to the oppressor what is wrong. Oppressors, such as slaughterhouse managers and owners and workers, but particularly owners and managers, are so immersed in violence, and they've normalized violence, that they forget what they know deep in their hearts and in their conscience, that what is wrong, what is right and wrong. Like everyone now, I think, knows that deep in their conscience that, it's important to be kind, that thou shalt not kill, that it's wrong to abuse living beings. But so he just said, you need to point that out, because he said in a quiet moment, when they're all by themselves, they know what's right and wrong, but it's our job also to point it out. And then we have to communicate the truth with love, kindness, and simplicity and humbleness. So I'll just elaborate what he means by that. So these are some quotes I took from Tolstoy's book, A Calendar of Wisdom, which I recommend for everyone. It's just such a great book. So he says in the book, "For a truth to be heard, it must be spoken with kindness. Truth is kind only when it is spoken through your heart with sincerity. You should know that when a message you convey to another person is not understood by him, at least one of the following things is true. What you said is not true, or you have conveyed it without kindness." Then he also says, then he quotes Henry David Thoreau, which basically says the same thing. "The only way to tell the truth is to speak with kindness. Only the words of a loving man can be heard." And then Tolstoy says, "Truth cannot make a person unkind or too self-assured. The manifestations of truth telling are humility and simplicity. If you know the truth, or if you think that you know the truth, try to pass it on to others as simply as you can, along with a feeling of love for those persons to whom you pass it. Okay. And on the question of judging other people, remember that quote from the Gospels, I came not to judge, but to save. If you think that it is necessary to judge your neighbor, then say this looking directly into his eyes, and say this in such a way that you do not create animosity. Okay. And I wanted to say a bit about just the idea of community organizing, and which informs the work of Toronto Pig Save and the Save movement. And it's about people power, because we're up against the organization of powerful financial resources and greed and selfishness of the few exploiting the many. And, how do we counteract that? And Saul Alinsky wrote a classic book called Rules for Radicals. And he says the power of organized people is required to defeat the power of the establishment and its money. It is impossible to overemphasize the enormous importance of people doing things themselves. So in a community organizing approach, a good leader brings out leadership in others, and you work in leadership teams. It's not about one leader. It's not about a hierarchy. It's about, developing and encouraging and nurturing leadership in others, and so that everyone is an organizer. So if we're going to change the world, that's what we need to encourage. And, how do you define community organizing? And I wanted to, go to Cesar Chavez, who's was one of the key founders of the United Farm Workers. Someone asked him, how do you organize? Well, first you talk to one person, then you talk to another person, then you talk to another person. A good organizer has to work hard and long. There are no shortcuts. You just keep talking to people and working with them, sharing, exchanging, and they come along. So Cesar Chavez started a house meeting organizing drive, meeting small groups of people in their homes over 4 to 5 weeks. After organizing 75 such meetings, he called the 300 people to set up the new organization. I just wanted to look at that example because this is exactly what we need in the animal rights movement. We actually have to, I think, have paid organizers, community organizers, organizing entire neighborhoods and areas. And Toronto Pig Save and the Save movement has started some initiatives in this area. We just developed a leaflet called the Save leaflet, which has information about how to go vegan and has vegan coupons. And we just launched it on Earth Day this year. And we have the files, and it was designed by Vegan Street, John Baskey and Marla Rose did the graphics. And we have a file where the original file, so that any group can adapt it and change it in how they want and use it in their own town or city. I wanted to quote from Lee Staples, which sort of emphasizes what Saul Alinsky and Cesar Chavez says, and something that informs our movement. He says a successful direct action tactic involves lots of people, as many people as possible. So when we do our actions, it's not about like 3 people acting. It's about getting, 250 people at an all-day vigil. Strategy and tactics should maximize involvement of and direction by both the members and the leaders at every stage. So I just wanted to conclude by saying a few words about what you can do. So our group's main strategy is bearing witness. So we would like you to join us or to invite other people to vigils, and be the voice of the voiceless. And if you're too far from Toronto to attend a vigil, and there isn't a safe group in your community already, we encourage you to contact us to find out how you can start a safe group in your community. Our objective is to have a safe group at every single slaughterhouse around the world. And unfortunately, more than likely, there is a slaughterhouse in or near your community. And so we ask everyone, we think everyone has a responsibility to, to go to these sites of extreme injustice and to start a group. And please, visit our websites, TorontoPigsSave.org or the SAFE movement. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you so much, Anita. I'm going to go ahead and just, are you ready to close the slide?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll join you here, and we'll be able to just chat a little bit about this. I think it's very moving for people to realize the history that's involved in bearing witness, and also the SAVE movement, where it came from, and also to recognize the length of that and the way that people expressed their compassion. Even the girls that you showed the pictures of giving berries to the cows, a century ago. That's really amazing to know that, and to realize that we're working from this history, and that we're part of the history that includes Martin Luther King, and includes Gandhi, and includes Tolstoy. So I think that's really important for us to keep motivated, and to know that we're really continuing that path, walking in those same footsteps. So thank you for pointing that out and bringing all of this historical information to us, so that we can be empowered to go forward and to add more SAVE movements like you're describing, some of the vigils. So I'm going to check in in the chat box, and now what we'd like to do is open it up for questions. So for anybody who has some questions to ask Anita about the Toronto Pig Save or the SAVE movement, ways to get involved, or just questions about what you heard, what we'll do is we'll switch the format from the listen-only mode into what we call the Q&A mode, and then you'll be able to unmute yourself either on the computer or on the phone, and you'll hear a little announcement as I do that. So in just a moment, and then we'll go through and check in the chat box as well for questions.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
So if you're on the phone, and there are several people on the phone with us, you can press *6 to unmute yourself. And if you're in the computer, then you can, there's a little icon right next to your name, and you can unmute yourself there.
Hi, I just unmuted myself. This is Marion in North Carolina.
Hi, Marion.
Hi, Marion.
Anita, thank you. I am overwhelmed. That was just amazing. I'm so honored to be part of this group and to be part of the SAVE North Carolina Farmed Animal Save. My question is, maybe I'm jumping to the end of the book too fast, but how do we go from bearing witness to ending factory farming?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of feedback. Is that normal?
Yeah, that I haven't heard that. Not normal.
Okay. Okay.
What we might do. Okay. We might just. I'm going to change the format back for a moment so we can answer the question, and then we'll open it up afterwards.
All attendees are muted.
Okay, thank you for that question, Miriam. I think that, entering factory farming is going to take many different strategies, and the SAVE movement is just one piece of it. But it's a piece that I think is important because it's about involving people, and that's why I try to quote a lot of community organizers like Lee Staples and Saul Alinsky about how it's important that everyone see themselves as an organizer and take that responsibility and have sort of develop this strategy of people power versus financial interests and selfishness and greed. So I think that when people bear witness, it changes them completely. Like, I was an animal activist and an environmental activist and peace activist and women's rights activist and gay rights activist. But when I bore witness firsthand, it made animal rights a priority in my life. I just changed my life completely, and now this is like the mission. This is the most important thing in my life. And I just think if more people bear witness, that's going to happen to more people. And it's important to involve as many people as we can, because all of us have like specific skills and connections and networks and things that we can bring to the movement, whether it's song or media or, cooking, vegan cooking, or, doing direct actions like DXE or whatever it is. Like, it's really important to get as many people involved as possible. So I just see the Save Movement as one piece of the necessary sort of strategy. But, there's so many others, like, people developing vegan alternatives and, and there's so many others, but that's what the Save Movement is about. It's about involving people.
Thank you so much, Anita. And so I know that was Marion who had asked us that question, and she's been in the chat box as well. So if anyone else has a question, we'll do the unmuting for a moment.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
So does anyone have any other questions you'd like to ask Anita directly?
I do. I have a question.
Okay, great. Yeah, please state your name first.
This is Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hey, Anita, I have a question for you. So when people come to bear witness, there's always a reaction. Would you say that there is always a reaction from like somebody that has never connected with a farm animal or an animal, and then suddenly they see them on a truck? They suddenly have a reaction? Is that what you're saying, that there's never anybody that doesn't have a reaction?
Some people don't have a reaction. It's true. I mean, not everybody is moved. Like, some people are, some people don't even want to go close to the trucks. I mean, definitely people react differently, but what we found in general is a lot of people have become motivated after bearing witness to do a lot more. I mean, I don't think there are always exceptions, so I won't, I can't speak for everyone, but we've just found that for many people, it's the first event they've ever gone to, like, because they sort of were weary of going to protests or this, but after going to a vigil, they were much more willing to do, political activism, we find.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's fascinating to, I haven't been to that, to one of your vigils, but I'm always fascinated, since I do a lot of leafleting myself, that I'm always engaging people in meeting the animals, and that I'm always so shocked at how people don't have any connection. So I would just wonder, like, how that would be for people driving down the street and then all of a sudden to stop and get out of my car and say, what is this about? Say just some mundane person decides to get out of their car on their way to their mundane job in life. Not saying we're all not in that. And then to decide to find out what this group's about that they've driven by 50 times or 100 times on their way to work. And then to not really, allow themselves to feel anything. So that's sort of the roundabout way of the question, is because I've been so interested to notice myself how few people, what they say to me when I say to them, you should meet an animal. It would really change your experience of how you view what you put in your mouth. Mm-hmm. And so I just was curious.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, today a woman stopped at our pig save vigil this morning, and she then went across the street. She said, "Oh, I have to go to work," but then a truck came, so then she crossed the street with us. Right away, she petted the pigs and was really moved. Said she was an omnivore, but she was mostly vegan. But I said, it's really important to just take that next step and go vegan, and not contribute and be a role model to others. And she was really willing to take that next step, and also to say, she said, "Oh, when is your next event? And can I get involved?" And she was really moved by the experience. So, for us, the key challenge is for people to actually stop and actually look and see what we see, because driving by can be enough for some people to actually go vegetarian or vegan. I've heard of a lot of people who've just seen, an animal like a cow or a pig stare at them on the highway, and that changed them. We've had lots of people tell us. But, to actually stop and bear witness the way we do, it's so powerful. So for us, the challenge is, how do we get people to do that? I'm sure it's not going to change everyone, but it will change a lot of people.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for answering that question and for asking it, Cheryl. I'm going to address a couple of the questions in the chat box as well. So folks are wondering, how do you keep faith in humanity, Anita? How do you do that?
That's a good question. I think all of us in this animal justice movement, we see the very best of people and the very worst. And I think seeing the very best of people, altruistic people are so kind. I've never met so many kind people as I have in the animal justice movement, and I've been in very many movements. That helps us survive, I think. But we've also seen the very worst. I'm sure many of you are traumatized by what you've seen firsthand or, through videos. And it's utterly shocking. And we do, sometimes we feel like, what is this planet? What is this planet? Is this hell on earth? Like it's truly shocking, what's happening to animals. But the key is for people to learn. I think the biggest barrier we're facing is ignorance. I am so ashamed to say that I used to salivate at seeing a pig roast when I was a teenager. I know kids that are 5 years old who refuse to eat meat because they get it. Why did it take me till my early 20s to become vegetarian, and to my late 30s to become vegan? So the challenge, and I participated in that horrendous violence by, being a consumer. And so, Gandhi and Tolstoy talked about the non-cooperation with evil. So if we as consumers do not support this evil system of animal exploitation, it will fall apart. It's that simple. So I think, in terms of having some hope, it's just about informing and educating people. And the vast majority, I think, would be open to learning and changing. So, I'm hopeful in that way, because things have, impossible things have happened before due to organizing. So whether it's, the overcoming slavery, or, giving women equal rights and gay rights, all these were huge struggles, and success was achieved through community organizing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thanks, Anita. Here's another one that we've seen a couple of times, just how to handle people when they're afraid to bear witness because they know it's going to be an emotionally difficult experience, how to convince people that it's worthwhile.
That's a really good question. And I think that's why I wanted to quote Tolstoy on what is love. You yourself know that when you feel that you're loved or you're not loved. When you're loved, someone's giving their time and their strength to you, and also willing to sacrifice for you. So, if we love animals, it involves those things. It involves putting ourselves out there, getting out of our comfort zone. I myself am an extremely squeamish person. I cannot even look at someone getting a needle. I could never watch horror films because I'm so squeamish. Yet I've been inside a slaughterhouse. So I think we all have incredible strength that we can summon for those that we love. You know, I love this planet. I love animals. I love human rights. I love all these things. And as all you do, and I know I'm partly traumatized. I know I'm suffering. Like after 5 years, I feel just recently I've sort of like lost some balance, and I'm not as composed. And I need to. I mean, and then we all have techniques to deal with it, so we can share with people. There are techniques to help you. Yes, it is. It does cost something. Yes, it is painful, but there are techniques. Personally, my own techniques have involved like reading Tolstoy and Gandhi, and I find that incredibly grounding. But we all make mistakes, and that's okay. You know, we're human. But the ideal is to, you know, use a love-based strategy. The ideal is to bear witness, and we should, you know, and you know, it involves pain. But you know, that's how change happens. You know, it happens through sacrifice, and that's always happened throughout social history. People have done much more than we have. People have given their lives for different social justice causes in the past.
Mm-hmm. And one of the goals of our sustainable activism campaign is to provide some of those resources for people. So if you did choose to start one of the safe movements in your area around a local slaughterhouse, and you felt as though the emotional impact was becoming overwhelming, you can contact the Animal Activist Support Line and get some support and free counseling and create a strategy for going forward. There are a lot of coping skills out there to use that include everything from taking a walk in nature, reading Tolstoy, spending time with companion animals. There's a lot of things that are available and that some of the counselors can help you with, things that you may know but forget in the moment of feeling a lot of emotion. Also, we have that support group. That's another opportunity. If you're reaching out and doing things that are causing you pain, then let's talk about it. Let's find ways that we can support each other as a community so that we can do this work. So another question, Anita, was just how, when you're talking with people and you're describing the suffering, and you can tell that people are shutting down, then, and they don't want to think any more about the subject, then how do you handle that? How do you open people up who aren't willing to take a look?
I think that's where the diversity of strategies really comes in. You know, using protest art and music, using you know, other social movements like United Farm Workers are a good model for us because they were incredibly intensive on the ground grassroots group. They did regular events like to fight for the right to unionize farm workers. But they eventually then they also used like celebrity activism. They were in California, so they drew on celebrities, and that sort of broadened the appeal and invited a lot of new people to the movement or to learn about the movement. So you know, Emma Goldman purportedly said, if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of the revolution. You know, it's important to have like protest art and do other things to draw people in. So, you know, sanctuaries, like, you know, bring people to farm sanctuaries and experience the joys of animals and, you know, when they are loved and in a peaceful environment. And so, yeah, so I you know, I think there's such a rich diversity of sort of strategy and tactics that we can adopt. And so I always see it as a test. So if you're given a difficult person who, you know, laughs at you or thinks, you know, I'm never going to go vegan, it's just a challenge to us. It's a test, and, you know, to try different ways. So, you know, sometimes you try films and, you know, maybe Earthlings won't work for them, but Forks Over Knives might be the opening or entry film for them. So I just think, you know, just see it as a test and try different things. Don't give up. And I'll give an example. Like, my mother was incredibly stubborn, and for 10 years, she laughed at me. But because I loved her so much and she was one of my best friends, you know, I didn't give up on her. And then eventually she did go vegetarian and then vegan. But that was after, you know, laughing at me and thinking I was crazy. But then she fully adopted us. And she's the reason the group started, because I adopted the dog for my mom. And then she was entirely supportive of the movement. So people change, and I'm sure all of you have stories like that. You know, people you thought would never change, and then they have an awakening. It's just about waking people up.
Mm. Mhm. Thank you. That's important to realize and to keep in mind. And I like holding on to some of the positive stories, like you did, even with your mom, knowing that that's possible. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions? We have just a few minutes left. There was another person. Let's see, somebody here recommended. There was someone named Selinsky, I think you quoted, and there was another person that was recommended. You were also advised to write a book in the chat box, Anita, putting together a lot of these resources. It is amazing to have it all in one place. It's very powerful, and I think it's encouraging to activists to know that we're part of this tradition. And I think it was Richard Ruth who mentioned this other activist.
Miles Horton. Yeah. Yes, I'm familiar with Miles Horton. So he set up a school in Tennessee where
yes.
Rosa Parks attended and Martin Luther King spoke at, and it was he was an important part of the labor movement, the civil rights movement. Miles Horton, and I'm just trying to remember the school, Highlander Folk School. So as part of my research for my PhD, I looked at all these schools, independent schools that were set up with adult education and training social activists. And yeah, Miles Horton is a huge inspiration.
Cool. Well, that's good to hear. It's nice to know that we have so much in common with a lot of the other movements too, because I think that's, we did this series of sustainable activism tips, and several of the people like Ray Sikora and also another gal named Phyllis Levinson, who's a coach for social change activists, she pointed to the history of the movement. And both of them, they wanted to talk about, we have to look at the change that's happened so far. And I also think that you spoke quite well to the change to come and how we need to look at these models for effective organizing. And the strategy that Cesar Chavez brought forth, just having really like a house party, have these little organizing events in each other's houses and grow that, and how important that is. So this has been a great webinar and great presentation because it gave a lot of practical tools for us as activists, and it really is empowering to say, hey, I can do this myself. I can speak to people and they can help speak to other people. And there are, as Anita mentioned, slaughterhouses in everyone's area. There is one. And I think Richard put together a link that's in the chat box of how to find a local slaughterhouse, but you can also go to Google and just explore as you would try to research anything. Just start with your town and put slaughterhouse ? And you might get the answer right there. So let's see. Any other questions? Anything else anyone would like to say before we head out this evening? Yes.
Hi, Chris in Philadelphia.
What's your name?
Chris.
Chris. Okay. Thank you, Chris.
I can remember a couple times one time going down to the lobster tanks in the giant restaurant here, the giant food store here. And the last time I was ordering Chinese food there.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the lobsters there, and I couldn't, do much of anything, but I just told them, if anybody comes here and tries to buy one of you, I'm going to try and talk them out of it.
Aww. Well, thank you, Chris. And I think these are things that you might have in common with other people on the call tonight who've seen and witnessed some of this, even in restaurants, the sadness of what happens there, and really looking into the eyes of some of these living beings. I can remember doing that as well, probably as a child, just really staring at them and just horror and also with compassion, because I think we know their fate, and I think that's something also that gives us, we have a responsibility because we do know what's going to be happening. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that I think it's important to share that the animals, they're comforting each other, and to really, it seems like you've seen a lot of that, Anita, and I think that's something that I think helps us and can help other people too to find their own sense of compassion. It's really to see the animals comforting each other, reassuring each other, seeing the looks in their eyes, like you mentioned, that worry. Those are all emotions that we face, many of us on a daily basis about different things in our lives, and being able to see that it's very moving, actually, in a way that I can see how it puts fire under our feet to get out there and get active for the animals. So thank you for sharing those images with us.
Thanks. Yeah, what we see is like a lot of interspecies affection and caring as well. So goats take care of lambs, and particularly animals that have been rescued from slaughter. They're so sympathetic and helpful to other animals of other species. And just on the question from your caller on crabs and lobsters. So one of the women who came to our vigil this morning, she's 19 and she's from Turkey, and she's studying arts in a college. And she was just in BC for a visit, British Columbia, Vancouver. And she saw a tank full of crabs at a restaurant, and it was right by the water. So when no one was looking, she took one crab and threw her or him into the water. And then she did it to another and another and another. And she got 8 crabs out, but then they caught her. And then she started to run, and they ran after her. And then they threw her to the ground and even put their knee on her chest, and she was crying and crying. And then an old lady came by and said, what she did was right, and we're destroying her planet. And then she started to cry, the older woman, and they had called the police. And then when the older woman was crying, then they sort of said, okay, you can go, but just be careful because we called the police. So even they switched around, the people who had brutalized her for rescuing crabs. But she's a person that comes to our vigils, and she just told us that story. She's very brave. But just to give you examples, like she's only 19, and that's more than I've ever done in terms of. So it's very encouraging. People are incredible. So these are the kinds of stories that keep us going.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that, Anita. It's just how important it is for each of us to follow our heart and to speak our truth. That's really, really important for us and also for the animals. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for sharing all of this history and knowledge and your stories with us. It's really important, and I am so grateful to everyone for joining us this evening, because this is part of what Cesar Chavez is talking about. Everybody speaking together, and now each one of us can go speak to other people about this, and we'll provide you with a replay link, and you can share it, and it can, who knows, maybe it'll go viral. But the idea here is to support this love-based community organizing and to be active for the animals. So thank you for inspiring all of us, Anita. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. The inspiration bounces back and forth. So thank you.
And if anyone wants to unmute themselves for a group goodbye, you're welcome to do that. And then we'll hopefully see you for our next webinar. We have so we're here in May. So in June, we have Phyllis Levinson, who's the social change activist coach. She's going to share some of her tips and tools in June. So we're looking forward to that as well. And actually next week, if you're tuned into the Vegan Spirituality online gatherings, we'll have a woman, Rachel Augusta from the Gutsy Grackle. She's going to join us. She has an emergency room that she runs for humans and for animals, which is a really novel idea, and she's going to share her journey with us next week. So we hope that you can tune in to all of these events, and also stay tuned to what Anita's up to with the Save movement and Toronto Pig Save. And we'll send you all the links to what she's doing as well. So thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and keep up the good work for the animals. All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Take care.
Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
Anita.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
It's
Bye,
wonderful talking.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.